Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. I hope everyone is safe and healthy. Again, thank you for being with us this week. Today, we're going to talk about two-channel audio, Denon and Marantz. Again, this is a global session, global co-hosted. We have Australia, New Zealand, we have Southeast Asia, South Asia, India, Middle East, the Gulf states. There might be some people from Europe, Russia. I've seen definitely someone from South Africa. Hello there. And the Americas. So very exciting. I am Frederic. I'm the product marketer for rest of Asia at Sound United, based in Hong Kong. Also joining us today is Jim Crowley in Minnesota, representing the Americas. And behind the scene today, we have also William Chang, our veteran product expert for Denon and Marantz in Hong Kong. We have Jen and Phil in San Diego, California. So they will be answering your questions online and live. Hi, Phil. Hi, Jen.
What's up? How you guys
Hi.
doing?
We have well over 250 registered participants. So again, a big thank you to all the partners across the region for promoting these webinars and giving us an awesome audience. How about we start talking about Denon?
I'm going to let
Um,
you go to town here, sir, because
do,
Denon two-channel gear is new to the US. It's
all right,
really
okay.
only a year old, so you go.
So Denon, we are celebrating this year in October the 110 years legacy. So it's we're the best in sound quality. We have a history of technologies first. You can see here the history of the logos. That 110 anniversary is a special logo that they developed for this year. Talking a little bit about Denon's history, we introduced the gramophone player and the first machine to make single-sided disc records. So we were the first to sell stereo records. We also developed the moving Carl phono cartridge. We developed PCM, the technology that led to the compact disc. We also led to the first direct drive turntable for studio use. So plenty of first things. We began manufacturing stereo audio components in 71. That's nearly half a century ago. The first to actually produce and sell pre-recorded CDs. The global leader in two-channel audio, obviously, but also in 2008, we were the first to have the universal Blu-ray and SACD player. And in 2018, we were again the first to have the 13-channel amp and the first to introduce IMAX Enhanced, and so on and so on. So a lot of things that we were proud of in terms of history. And the cartridge that you see here, the DL103, is the actual longest continually produced audio product since 1962. We're still making this. So on the left, you see our lady who works in the cartridge lab, manufacturing these cartridges totally by hand. So basically, the 110th anniversary is something that's going to be celebrated globally. We're celebrating the Denon Sound, the history of first, the history of Japanese heritage and craftsmanship, the history of performance, quality. So the goals of this campaign that we're doing is a little bit for awareness, increase the Denon brand's awareness globally, but also a little bit of brand building. So reinforce the new Denon position and the new brand pillars. There's a little bit of conversion involved as well. Of course, we want to increase the sale across all regions and all categories. We are going to create something special for dealers and end consumers to celebrate this. So we are very excited to announce that we will have 4 limited edition anniversary products, and this will be a 110th anniversary AVR, a 110th anniversary PMA, an integrated amp with networking, a 110th anniversary CD/SACD player, and a 110th anniversary cartridge. So that's all we can say about it. This will all launch in October. Now, Denon obviously will be sounding different than Marantz, and that brings us to the next step. What type of technology do they use to make Denon sound different than Marantz? So first thing is they're not using edge dams, we're using ultra high current MOSFET power devices. And that's a device that has a gain that's even higher than that of bipolar transistors. So one ultra high MOSFET power device is the equivalent of 35 regular MOSFETs or the equivalent of 3 bipolars. but without the problems of powering and using multiple devices. So something that goes along with it is what we call single push pull. Now, if you look at the three drawings of the horses pulling the carriage, a single one is just one horse pulling one carriage. If you do multi-parallel, you have a lot of little horses pulling the same carriage. But if you're using the ultra high current single push pull, you're using a huge horse pulling an even bigger chariot. So the way they can compare this, if you look at the graph on the right, you see the blue line, which is the 3 bipolar transistors. The green one is 3 MOSFETs, whereas the red one is your single MOSFET signal. So you can see there's way more output current that you have there. Also, in 1967, a little bit more of the history there, we started doing the development of alpha processing. The very first recording that was made in January 1971 was the first in digital PCM using a Denon PCM digital recorder. So to go back a little, in 1967, the first PCM recorder was developed by NHK in Japan, and that device stored the signals on videotape. In 69, NHK expanded that system to do 2-channel stereo. And then in 71, using that NHK PCM recording systems, the engineers at Denon recorded the first commercial digital recording, which you see here. It's a jazz recording by Steve Marcus called Something. And then in 72, Denon unveiled the first 8-channel digital recorder, which is the graphic that you see here, the DN023R. That's the first 8-channel digital recorder using 4 heads to open real broadcast videotape. So that's the one on this slide. Now, what's alpha processing? So if you have a digital recording in PCM, say here the CD, which is recorded in 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz sampling rate. The black line represents the original waveform, the original analog waveform. The gray blocks represent the digital data from CD, which is quantized. And then the blue line represents the digital to audio analog waveform. You see, it's not as smooth as the black line. So what they did is they started using interpolation as a technique, and that's the basic concept of alpha processing, the interpolation of the lines to make it more smoother. So they started with 16 times oversampling, and then they came with advanced AL32 processing. So you can see how close the digital to analog waveform resembles to the original waveform after the advanced AL32 processing. And there's different types on this slide. You see the evolution of the different types of alpha processing that we came up. Again, on the left side of that graphic, you see the results without any processing, and on the right, you see with alpha AL32 processing. So you see you have way more points to recreate that original waveform. So originally, this was introduced in 93, and then over the years, we've added more features. We increased the bit rate, we added upsampling, and then we started adding multi-channel and so on. So currently, the most current version is what we call Advanced AL32 Processing Plus. That's the latest version. We're now supporting 32 bits, 384 kilohertz input signal, and this is only for PCM. So we're not gonna do the advanced AL32 processing plus on the DSD signals, which allows for the playback of high-res files thanks to the Burr-Brown PCM 1795 DAC, which you can find in the 2500 series, the 1600 series, and also in the DCD 800 and the network player DNP 800, which we'll talk about this later. The Denon engineers are in fact now working on the next generation AL processing, which will achieve 1.5 megahertz oversampling. So you can see here, the current one, everything that's 44.1 will be upconverted to 705.6. Anything that's based on multiples of 48 will be upsampled to 768. So it's different from what Marantz does, but it achieves a similar type of outcome. Now, this brings us to the 2500 series that we just mentioned. So the premium range of the integrated amplifiers and SACD players. So unlike Marantz, where you have separate devices to do the DA conversion, With Denon, we've included the DAC part inside the integrated amplifier, so it's a different approach. Going a little bit through the specs, it's 2 times 160 watts at 4 ohms. So the biggest parts here to address is the fact that it has the advanced ultra high current single push-pull circuit MOSFET. So it's also has a new DAC master clock design. You have the same USB input high resolution audio that you find on the majority of the premium lines of Marantz. So what is different with Denon is we've integrated it into one single chassis. Also, the digital isolator is included to eliminate anything from high frequency computer noise. There's an analog mode, a pure analog mode for switching off all the digital circuitry. And it has, of course, the advanced AL32 processing plus. It has a very good reviews. This particular article that was in Hi-Fi News, on the left, you see a graph. They were showcasing the instant dynamic power output that you have. So the dynamic power output versus distortion. The black trace you see there, that's the 8 ohm signal. The red trace is the 4 ohm. The blue is 2 ohm, and the 1 ohm is green. So you can go all the way up to 770 watts in 1 ohm. So that's impressive. The maximum current that you have there is 27.9 amps, and the damping factor is 700, which is very high. So this allows you to get very well controlled woofer movement. On the right, you see something similar, which is the digital processing. So you see the total harmonic distortion versus the digital signal. At 1K, the red line represents all the SPDIF. The black line represents the USB, and at 20 kilohertz, the blue represents USB. So it's very impressive. In fact, the DAC in that PMA 2500 is comparable to a high-end DAC. So again, here you have the rear panel of the PMA 2500. I'm not going to go too far into detail. You can see it's got dual binding posts, so you can do your bi-wiring. If you look on the inside, a couple things that you notice is the power transformers. They are oriented in 180 degrees from each other to avoid magnetic field interference. So this way they will cancel out the magnetics. You're not going to find toroidal transformers in the Denon amps, but they do have their own custom electronics to tune the sound. So they have their own Denon capacitors, of course, and they use the ultra high current MOSFETs. Also check out the huge heat sinks that you see there. Also, the power amp section sits under the heatsink, and the digital section sits under the power transformer in its own shielded chamber. You see also the capacitors are quite large, so those are the reservoirs for the energy. They're able to release the power energy very, very quickly. And the DSD 2500, again, the CD and SACD transport, it's not off the shelf, it's made in-house by Denon themselves. You've got your Texas Instrument DAC that does 32-bit all the way up to 384 kilohertz. The usual analog, optical, and coaxial inputs. Also your 35 millimeter infrared input. So you have your mini jacks. You can do your CI, your customs install. If you have a repeater for infrared, because everything in is a rack, you're able to accommodate these. And you got a very nice aluminium remote there, brushed aluminium. On this slide, you see the SACD construction. Also, this is what we call the advanced SVH mechanism. You'll also there notice two transformers. One is for the digital part and the other is for the analog parts. And again, here you see that they are placed in an 180 degrees axis for exact the same reason. Which brings us to the 1600 series that Jim can talk a little bit while I'll sip a bit of water.
You were going, Frederic. That was really good. So the 1600 series is not quite the performance level of the 2500 that Frederic had been talking about there. And also, this does not have Power Amp Direct. The only Denon integrated amp that has Power Amp Direct is the 2500, the aforementioned 2500. It's quite a history that Frederic went through. So the PMA 1600 is 70 watts a channel into 8 ohms. It's 140 watts per channel into 4 ohms. And what it does do is have our advanced AL32 plus processing. So again, we can do the asynchronous DAC in, and this has got that proprietary Denon processing where it extrapolates the data to smooth out the digital signals. It can do DSD as well as PCM, and it's got both moving coil and moving magnet, which is really quite remarkable given its relatively low price, 1,600 euros with both moving coil and moving magnet. That's pretty darn cool that it supports that. In addition, it has other digital inputs, and then you've got your analog inputs, obviously. 4-way or 5-way binding posts, speaker AB, all of those lovely things. So you can get lots of flexibility and lots of hookup. One cool thing in this picture here, you can kind of see that little tiny window, and it's small, but it does actually give you the sampling rate from the signal that it's seeing and decoding, which is a nice thing to have. Now, if we get to the top off picture, which is quite impressive, again, 1,600 euros. There is a lot of stuff packed into that box. Look at that. And if you really look at it, it does have mirrored construction, right? So you've got mirror image amplifier sections. You've got separate power supplies. You've got separate amplifier boards, and you can see those separate heat sinks, one for the left and one for the right. I'm just blown away by what you get for 1,600 euros. That's quite amazing. And I will tell you, this one we do get in the US. The 2,500 we don't. And I have used this, and it sounds really fantastic. It's kind of a pain in the butt to move around because it's pretty heavy, but it does sound fantastic. And it does give you that flexibility, which is kind of a different take than Marantz, by including the asynchronous DAC in your digital stuff, so you don't need that separate source, which is not how Marantz does it here. And then the DCD 1600, which I believe is 1199 euros, is an SACD player. So not just CDs, but also SACD. And again, advanced AL32 plus processing, which is going to give you the smoothest possible digital signal. We also have built our own drives, which is really remarkable. The physical drives for most companies are just something they purchase. They just go find one like you would get in a laptop or a tower computer. And this is, all right, this looks reliable based on the data, and it's inexpensive, and it will, the lasers can track what we need it to track, the SACD and the CD or whatever it is. Whereas we actually design our own, trying to make sure that we get rid of vibration. Remember, we talked about vibration a lot in turntables. Why are we talking about vibration again, for crying out loud? We're talking about vibration because just like vibration can make noise in a turntable, it can actually make noise in electronic signals. It can create distortion, actual vibration, which is why you see all this design implementation with the feet and all of these things to try and isolate these pieces. And that's one of the things you get. As you spend more money, you get better isolation from vibration and stuff. But anyway, we actually build our own drives, which is pretty darn remarkable in my opinion. And then we have the 800. Frederic, did you want to jump back in, or do you want me to just keep going?
You keep going. You're doing a great job.
Well, thank you very much. Kind of you to say. So then we have the 800 series, which is sort of our really high performance entry level series. It's quite remarkable. So the PMA 800, which is the integrated amp, and then we have a CD only player. It's not SACD. And then we actually have a separate network player. Now that network player will go perfectly well with either the PMA 1600 or the PMA 2500. You don't have to limit it to just the 800 series, but this is the only standalone model that we make. We're down to 50 watts a channel, which, let's be honest, for many people will be way more than enough. you've got us doing all of those little details that we've done before, just not quite to that same level. And look at this, at 599 euros, you actually get MM and MC phono input. So you have a switchable moving magnet, moving coil phono input. And moving coil cartridges tend to sound better. They also tend to cost a lot more. We do have digital inputs for high res, but not the asynchronous DAC that you find on the 1600, which is really the best way to listen to high res music. With the DCD 800, which we have a CD player only, but what do we have in there? Our advanced AL32 processing plus, our proprietary advanced alpha processing, which gives us smoother digital sound. So even in a really inexpensive CD player at 499 euros, we still are putting in all of those things that Denon has come up with over the years, those firsts, being the first in digital audio and all of those things. They have spent a lot of time doing this, a very different path from what Marantz went down. And we can still play back high res, FLAC files, and 5.6 megahertz in DSD, which is again, not through disk, through the digital input. That's quite remarkable. And then we have the network player, the DNP 800, which gives us HEOS, which is our, again, wireless music streaming system, high res music streaming system. And then we have Apple AirPlay 2, Bluetooth, all of those things. And oh, what do we see again? The advanced AL32 processing plus, once again, giving us that best possible digital source that we can deliver with Denon's digital history. So a lot of flexibility for not a lot of money. And then, so we got a network player, a CD player, and an integrated amp, all under $700. That's quite remarkable, each, not total, each. And then we have one little other thing that I think we really need to explore. And before we do that, before we start back into turntable land, we're very excited about turntables because you are talking to or listening to a bunch of people who love albums. You know why? Because we're all kind of old and we can't read covers on CDs. It's impossible. The big print on a record is really a nice thing. And there's something else about records, but I'm not going to go into that. Phil, do we have any burning questions that we should answer before we go into these Denon turntables?
Okay, let's look at a few things here. One reason somebody asked, is it Jewy? Jew?
I don't know. You know what? We are going to go off. We're going off
Okay.
here. Jen, I'm going to ask you to unmute Jewy if they're still
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
because I am positive I am butchering that name. And I feel so bad about it. I would
Okay.
like you to tell us what your
Okay.
name, how to say it. Please
Yes.
do that.
As he finds her, finds
Give
him.
me one
So the
second.
so the 2500. He's asking
Yes.
why it doesn't sell in the USA, and it has to do with the voltage. So it runs in a different voltage system than what we're using. So they would have to convert it, and the cost was too difficult, which is why I think that's why the 2500 is not here.
And
Let me see.
I have unmuted, and I want to say it on record that my guess was G. So let's see.
Ooh.
They have to unmute themselves as well, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
So how do we say your name so that I am not feeling guilty every time we do one of these? Because you ask so many great questions, your name comes up a lot, and I feel terrible.
Oh, it's okay. I think you can just call me Daniel. Chewy is my
Daniel.
Chinese name. When I register with the software, I using my legal name to register.
Okay.
But
So
and I couldn't find a way how to change my name for the video for the conference software.
Okay.
Well,
okay.
But it is
everyone,
Dewey Sue, right?
Two.
everyone. We have Dewey,
Or Daniel.
who is also known as Daniel. Boy, that would have been good to know, what, about a month ago? I couldn't feel stupider. Frederic, you might have to talk about the turntable for a
Okay.
couple of
Hey,
minutes. I am
hey,
horrified.
hey, Jim. Here's a quick question for you. You mentioned that your I think you said your brother has a TD15 with LED lights, and
Cousin,
Daniel, cousin, and Daniel wants to know what the LED lights were. What LED lights was he using?
I would have to find out. It was a strip he bought, and he actually put it on, so his turntable sits on top of his cabinet,
Uh-huh.
and he actually put the strip on the back of the cabinet, but at the very top.
Mhm.
And then when he turns the lights off, I'll see if I can find the
Yeah.
picture.
Because I will say that you can buy really good, inexpensive LED lights that could be cut to size. I just did my son's entire room with them for like $40. So you could buy some really nice ones these days. It even come with a Bluetooth app for about $25 US. You trim them, and they have adhesive on them. You trim them to the size you need to fit under the turntable, and then you stick them dual adhesive to the not the turntable, but to the desk or table it's sitting on, and it'll uplight it beautifully for minimum dollars. And you could change the light based on your mood. So you could do it for $25 US. Simply just look up Amazon LED light strips, and you can find a whole lot of different options. And they can be trimmed to distances like 6 inches and shorter and stuff like that. All
So you
right.
should go for the RGB ones to change the color, right?
Yeah, that's what I
LG.
have, RGB. So my kid can change his color, reds, blues, purples, greens, whatever he wants, and he can do it from his phone. So it's pretty neat.
Also, great.
I
Man,
even
I
have,
don't know about you guys, but if I had that kind of thing available back in the day when I was a much younger man,
uh,
oh, could I have had some fun with that.
there's even ones
Anyway,
that have a microphone and they'll change colors and blink as the music goes. And Jim would really be in trouble if that was the case. Okay.
Yeah, I had one of those in my bedroom. It was like a block of three incandescent lights. One was red, one was orange, and one was green. And
Uh-huh.
there's a little box, and it had this microphone in, and you could set it to different patterns. But like
Mhm.
you just said, it has a microphone that picks up the music, and based on the music, it was like going. You had a little disco back in your
Mhm.
room. That's what we
Yeah.
were doing
Hey,
in the early 70s.
hey, Jim, here's another question. Remember you talked about taking an ND 8006 and connecting it to an MM 725?
yes,
Um, he was wondering, can he use the 12-volt trigger? Is there a 12-volt trigger on the ND to turn the power amp on? I cannot
y-
remember. Or
yes,
do you have to
actually
physically?
there is.
Okay, so
There is
yes.
our link on
Okay,
the back,
okay.
because we
So you
can
can.
do that with the integrated amp as well.
Okay, all right. So let's move on.
Because there's one thing that we didn't talk about, which you mentioned when you started talking about the album art and looking at information, is the majority of the products that we just been gone through are, at least those with the networking or with the USB, are compatible with Rune. So we have all these Rune certified products
Mhm,
now. And so
mhm,
you're able to use but that's probably, again, referring to a different
mhm,
webinar that we did before, but at least that's something we should mention as well. Both
mhm.
Denon and Marantz, a lot of these 2-channel are also Rune certified.
Exactly, exactly.
FYI.
Okay.
Any other questions, Phil, before we get
I'm just
back,
going to
we
let's
wind
let's
this
go.
down?
Let's do the turntable, and then we'll come back and answer anything else that I see. Okay.
Okay. The new Denon, well, relatively new, these are from last year, DP400 and DP450, and there's only a minor difference between them, are completely new designs. These are not just a rehash of the DP300 or 30 or any of those things. These are completely ground up new designs. And the reason that's important is because we went back to what Denon actually used to do, which was, let's go for performance first and minimize any of the extra stuff. So what did we get rid of? The first thing we got rid of was the fully automatic push play. The tone arm goes to the record. When it gets done, it lifts up and it goes back. And I'll show you a picture after a while that will explain why we did that. But we did keep auto tone arm lift and auto playback stop. So when you're playing a record, which I think is on the next slide. Oh, nope, slightly different order, Frederic. So there it
That's
is.
the one you wanted to look at, or the
Yeah,
auto?
yeah, that's the one.
Got
So
it.
it actually senses when the record gets to the end, when the tone arm moves into the end, and all it does is lift it via the cueing arm. So it just does that little lift, which is our little up and down. It brings that up, and then it stops the disc from spinning. What do you really need? Do you need it to go back to the bass? No. What you want it to do is to not keep going chook, 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 because now you're wearing your record, you're wearing your stylus, you're wasting electricity, and it's annoying as all get out. So we kept that part, the important part, but all of the auto stuff makes for a massive, massive amount of stuff inside the turntable. So let's go back now. We have this cool, I was mentioning LPs and how much fun they are. We have this cool dust cover that becomes an LP stand. And think about how many times you've seen images of people who are playing records and they have the record on some kind of stand near the turntable so you can see it. We included it for free. And we have that new modern dust cover. Okay, Frederic, let's keep going. We also have, not only do we have speed accuracy, and this is a belt drive turntable, by the way, and a built-in phono equalizer, which you can turn on or off. So if you don't have a phono preamp, but this has a unique thing, in my opinion, especially at this price point. It does have the 78 RPM speed, which means that if you have old records that maybe you got from your grandparents or your parents that are 78s, and there is music that exists on 78s that is not available elsewhere, or maybe you're just feeling nostalgic, you have the ability to play that. Now, I do want to mention, there are people that will tell you, no, you need a special cartridge for a 78. Not exactly true. I'll just tell you what it is. 78s are mono. So a mono cartridge will lever out the last tiny little bit of possible performance out of a 78. But are you going to buy a second turntable? Are you going to have two separate cartridges and swap them, which probably means you've got to rebalance the arm? Are you going to add a second arm to your turntable, which many people do at the extreme if they have a lot of 78s? No. And you're not going to hurt the 78 by playing it on this turntable with a stereo cartridge, and it will work just fine. So yes, you could get slightly better performance by using a mono cartridge. Then it becomes up to you. At these price points, we're not including two arms. There we go. Let's keep moving again. So remember with the DP300, we didn't have removable cables. I'm looking at the back of that DP400 there, Frederic, and I don't see any cables connected.
Exactly. I prefer it that way as well, because a lot of people swear with better power cables and a better RCA cable because they're able to tune. You may have a collection of certain type of music that's a little dull, and if you're using, for example, a silver-plated copper RCA cable on a system, maybe that's sounding a bit warm, you can get a bit more detail. So it gives the user the flexibility to use whatever cable they like or make their own cable, so to speak. So I'm a fan of that myself.
Awesome. So what are we doing? We made a lot of changes. Remember I mentioned that between the new models and the DP300? Look at our sensitivity. Massive improvement. Rotation speed accuracy or tolerance. Massive improvement. Signal to noise ratio. Gigantic improvement. 10 dB. That's enormous. And then we've also added the counterweight adjustment for stylus pressure. This is really quite a nice turntable for the money. So, Frederic, anything to add there, or should we just keep moving?
I think we can just keep moving. These are some close-up shots of some differences. And there's one difference is that quite obvious on the USB version is that you have an MP3 and a WAV recording button. Maybe we want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so this has become quite popular, and for the most part, Frederic, it's found on really cheap turntables, right? Really cheap turntables. But it's a useful feature because now you can take your records, which aren't what I would call exactly mobile, and record them in a digital file and take them with you on the road, on the CD, on the bicycle, on the train, when you're out for a walk. That's pretty neat because I don't know about you, Frederic, or frankly, you, Phil. I have albums that don't exist on CD. They just don't exist. And one of them that I had when I was young and lost, I recently found at a record store in beautiful Eau Claire, Wisconsin, just out of the blue. And it has one of my favorite guitar licks of all time, and it's not available on CD. So this gives us that opportunity to portabilize our music, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Keep going,
absolutely.
Frederic.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
you
was
know
going to,
what, Frederic? Talk to them about, yes, thank you.
and I've included the link this time. So it comes with, okay, it's very simple. The way it works is you insert a USB device, a little USB key. It has to be FAT32 formatted in order to work. And then you put the stylus on the record, and as soon as it's there, you press either the WAV or the MP3. I would personally use WAV because I'm not a fan of compressed, but anyway, it has the ability to give you a choice. And as soon as you press WAV, it starts recording. When you're done, you press the WAV button again. Then you take the USB drive, put it in your computer, and then you're able to edit out the bits at the beginning that you don't need, the silence bit, and at the end you can take those out. Or for those who prefer to remove the crackles, you're even able to use that to go further editing. So the software that comes with it, I think you need to use the serial number from your DP450, and then you can download the Music Cut software. But what we've been recommending is Audacity, because not all it's free. It also allows you to convert everything into FLAC, for example. The problem with WAV is it's uncompressed, but it doesn't allow you to add metadata like the album art, the track name, the album name, the artist name, that sort of stuff. So with the Audacity, when you convert it to FLAC, you're able to download all that music, including all the data from the album itself, and append it inside the file. So I would go for Audacity. There's a Mac and a PC version of it. We've given the link here, audacityteam.org. It's free, and it allows you to be a bit more flexible.
That's a great piece of advice, Frederic. Thanks very much. And that is the difference between the 450 and the 400, is the ability to record your album onto a digital file, the USB port. That's the only difference. Other than that, they are identical. All right, what else do we have for them today, Frederic, or tonight, or this
There's one
morning?
more slide where
Oh,
you wanted to show the mechanics and what
yes.
difference it does.
This in a nutshell is what I was saying about us going back to performance, which Denon has been known for high performance turntables for literally decades. Well, heck, let's be honest, since the inception. Look at the DP300. All of that hash that you see there underneath and on top of the bass is what's required to take that tone arm, lift it up, and return it to the bass. All of that. Look at the bottom of the DP400. It's really simplified. All we're going to do is lift the arm and stop the rotation of the platter. That's all. This is a much better performing machine.
And it looks much cleaner too, right? If you look at how the electronics are organized and everything, it's much
Yep.
neater, much more simple. Less is more.
Sometimes, yes. And
Okay,
let's be
well,
honest, you can still buy the DP300 if you need to have that fully automatic, right?
I'll skip. I'll get the 450 USB. I want to rip my
Me
old.
too.
Actually, have records that sound better than on CD.
Which there's that.
Yes, so
So,
I want the
Frederic,
best
do we
sounding
have
version.
anything else?
No, we have questions.
Someone said, why didn't we talk about the DR8 800H? That's actually a good piece. So let's talk about that one, and because that's kind of a piece we didn't cover. We covered the PM7000, and we covered the we covered. Did we cover the two? We didn't cover the NR piece either. The two channel.
No, we didn't do the NR1200 or the DR800.
Yes, the thing is, because these are categorized as AVRs, that's why we deliberately did not put them in, even though there are only two channels, and it's valid to put in a two-channel hi-fi session. Maybe or maybe not, we can think as them as hi-fi devices.
The way I want to say it, I think about it is, and we're going to talk about this actually at the Hi-Fi Summit this week. HDMI is becoming a audio input. If I have an Apple TV or I have a Fire TV or an NVIDIA Shield, a lot of times the way that I get that audio from my Tidal app to my AVR, even if it's in stereo, is from HDMI. So for a lot of times, if you're there may be some services or there may be some other places where you're going to utilize that. And then people were saying, man, I really like, I would love to have a Helios integrated amplifier, but I wish it had FM, and I wish it had a bass and treble knob, and I wish I can connect my TV to it because there's a TV in the room as well. This is your solution, you know. So it's still a hi-fi piece. It's just got different inputs on it.
The other thing is that it's a great starter piece for a lot of people that maybe can't do a surround system.
Exactly.
But want that convenience. Yeah, it is a great piece of gear. It really is.
So yes, it is another audio option. So if you're looking for a piece for two-channel stereo and you want to utilize some sort of device that has HDMI, a TV, or something like that, that's where that piece could definitely come in handy.
So I got a question for you, Phil. Would you prefer, if you use a laptop that has a USB output, obviously, but also an HDMI, if you would have a hi-fi two-channel, I'm not going to say high-end setup, but you connect it using HDMI to play software-based files,
Yeah.
or
So
using the
yeah,
USB, which
yeah.
one would you go for?
Asynchronous stack, number one, because you
There
get
you
rid of all the clock stuff, right? But you got to remember that HDMI signal cable can carry more data, especially when an eARC piece, than optical ever could. So if you're thinking about optical or some other digital to go from point A to point B, and that device has an HDMI and that device has a optical, you may get more data down the HDMI. It's just another option. My suggestion would be if you have a device that has both an HDMI and a digital out, but let's be honest, Apple TVs, Roku's, Fire Sticks, they don't have that. But if they did, like an NVIDIA Shield has an optical and an HDMI, you could play that source on both and A/B them, and then pick the one you like best. You know, but also, and what the deal breaker would be if I want to plug that NVIDIA Shield into a TV because I need to see what's playing on my NVIDIA Shield. You know, the HDMI is going to be the way you're going to have to go.
That's true, but it's probably a different beast if you would use USB-B and
Yeah.
use Nirvana or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
It would work,
asynchronous
but
stack is always number one. You know,
definitely for the
like
purist, it would go that way.
yeah, because the way I access music on my NVIDIA Shield is I use Rune to bring up the Shield to play out the I can play it out the optical to an older receiver or my media or my if I had a two-channel system. So I could do that, and that way I can search music and play stuff back. But like I said, if you have both pieces, play with them both. The second we get into multi-channel Atmos and multi-channel stuff, eARC supports uncompressed multi-channel audio. And optical and HDMI optical and coax will never do that, you know. So there's going to be reasons why you would want an HDMI input on something for future flexibility. One question someone brought up is we talked about there's MM and MC amp cartridges, and they want to know what Denon and Marantz products support the moving coil. And I think I said, I may be wrong, I said basically when you look at Denon, it was the PMA 800 and above. And when you looked at Marantz, I believe it was the PM12 and above, unless I'm wrong.
I believe you are correct,
Okay.
Yeah, I think so too. Yep.
Okay.
although I could be wrong on the Denon, but I'd have to go
Yeah.
back and look,
Yeah,
which
we'd
I
have
can
to look.
do.
The 800 has it. We'd have to check and see if the 600 has it. But the fact that that's a value add there.
Yeah, big time.
Okay. Somebody was asking about four-way binding posts on the 2500. I believe the binding posts are quite similar. I mean, there's different levels of binding posts as you spend more money, but I believe the Marantz ones are four-way. You know, was that banana, spade, bare wire, and what's the other one? The little kind of metal prong that sticks in it. So we can support all those, I believe. Somebody asked about DSD players for Marantz and Denon. You know, do we make them? Why don't we make them? That kind of thing. That's kind of a question. And I think that would be the main ones. So we don't make any. We make a few 2-channel Super Audio CD compatible units. Correct? We still do a few. But
Yeah.
we don't make any multi-channel units.
No, haven't for a while.
Yeah. It's getting rare to see multi-channel DSD or Super Audio CD.
Well, and also there are, I'm not going to say many, but there are a lot of Blu-ray players
Mhm.
that actually will support multi-channel SACDs. Oppo made one
Via the what?
over HDMI.
HDMI. Exactly. So we keep going back to HDMI is now becoming, people see it as a video thing, but if it can pass 100 and something, some insane amount of gigabits per second of video, passing audio via HDMI is like, you know what I mean? So that's something to think about.
Yeah, and obviously if you're going to do multi-channel, one of these 2-channel pieces is not going to give you the results you want.
Yeah.
I own a few.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. I own a few.
And then someone
Which is
asked
why you
about,
ripped them, right?
Yeah.
I have a couple of SACDs as well that are multi-channel. I've just used that Oppo player to rip them to a USB key that you put in the front as a piece of software out there that allows you to rip the SACD into DSD on your USB key. I think it's Sonoray, which then allows you to convert that into a DSD file, and then you just play with Audirvana your multi-channel. So I think players, DSD players, especially multi-channel ones, is not gonna. They're either very rare or they're not gonna be. There's not much demand because most people using that route would use their laptop and play it using the software, which probably sounds better because you will have again using asynchronous USB and you would have less jitter. So
yeah. And now Jordan was asking about are we going to get the Marantz? Are we going to get any Marantz products with HDMI 2.1? Can't tell you when, can't tell you what, but they're coming. That's all I have to say. Remember we talked about Denon and Marantz both have the same brains. So HDMI 2.1 is the brains. So you will be seeing those models in the future for those people who are Marantz fans or prefer the Marantz sound. Remember, there is no better. It's what you like. So there will be options coming, and we will let you know. So stand by for upcoming sessions. And then, and I think that is about it. So we can let these guys go.
All right, before we do that, we need to thank Jen and Phil and William Chang, who, after we finally figured out that we'd made a mistake, was able to go in and just answer a ton of questions. William, thank you so much for joining us and giving up your Friday evening.
No problem.
Yes.
thanks everyone, and also the distributors and the partners everywhere and globally to help us spread the message and to advertise these webinars. It's because of you that we have such a big audience, and that makes it so much more dynamic. It's so much more fun. We have a lot of questions that we can feed on, and which brings us to different topics and such. So thank you again very much. This is really, really great session again. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Adios.
Bye for
Bye-bye,
now.
everybody.
Until next
Thank
time.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye.